I like that, but you know, uh, I I've been having a LAN since the 90s, and it's evolved over time. So it's kind of interesting, but there's also a lot of inertia. I don't want to change anything because that's a lot of work. So how do I advance slides again? No, that's not it.
And just push that center button.
Oh, the center button.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Over time, it's evolved, sure. And I produce OS2 computers, so that's one thing that most people don't have to produce a lot of computers. So, yeah, I made a big diagram to help me keep track of it all, and I said, well, that's not really going to help very much, but it gives an idea of how complex all the pieces are. Some are wired, some are Wi-Fi. You know, where does all the power go through my backup power supply, and where does the pieces, I have a KVM to share a monitor amongst many computers, so you know, where do those connectors go? So that's kind of way too complicated. So I said, maybe I can simplify that down to just, okay, here's what the wired LAN does. And so I have a cable modem, you know, I have cable, and that's going to connect to the Wi-Fi router. I'm going to leave out Wi-Fi for now and just say, okay, Wi-Fi routers have some Ethernet output, and that's going to a hub, 8-port hub, and then that connects to the various computers and printer on the LAN. That's it for the wired LAN. I don't know how many of you even have a wired LAN anymore, but several people say, yeah, kind of. Yeah. So I have, you know, some of these computers are computers that are for sale, or I'm using them, or I think I might use them if I get that kind of client. But you know, hubs used to be such an important thing, and I think less so now as Wi-Fi takes over. But
well, that is one important thing. If you start buying a laptop, you can ask Alex how many laptops these days do not have an Ethernet port anymore.
Right. It's not a huge factor for Arc OS 5.0 because it won't run on a lot of the modern laptops that don't have an Ethernet port. But you know, as David makes improvements to the drivers, that's going to get to be a problem. So,
Alex, did they not support a 1 gigabit Ethernet USB adapter?
So I was going to ask.
Was I wrong about
I think it's 100 meg.
yeah,
100 meg, okay.
yeah, no, it's an old one. Yeah. So, and right, you know, yeah. What about USB Ethernet? Well, if you want 100 megabit one, that's okay. Also, it's no longer made, so that's an issue, I suppose, as well. Although with eBay, I guess it's not so bad. I didn't see too many on eBay though. Wireless, that's, you know, obviously a lot of things, and you know, a lot of them aren't, you know, they're just Macs and iPhones and Internet of Things items on my Wi-Fi. So yeah, that's, and I have my server, which I mark here because, well, why? Because what LAN services do I run on that server? Well, one thing, I'm just going to go straight to the bottom, Samba. By sharing out my files on Samba, almost everything that's on the Internet of Things or iPhones or Androids or whatever do speak some flavor of Samba. So if you're sharing on a Samba server and you're on your own private LAN, you're behind a firewall, then anything you've got can use your OS2 files. And that, for me, is the biggest thing. You know, you say, well, OS2 can't open this file, I can't do that file. I can attach something to my LAN that does, and so I'm still essentially an OS2 user, and I can't use this kind of file, but I've got the device which can. And so that, you know, I use a zillion other services I probably don't really need. But so I don't know how that works for anybody else, if they really have a heterogeneous network that, you know, you keep all your stuff with OS2 access, but.
I have a bunch of stuff to say, but I'll save it.
Well, no, it's just sort of this is actually the last slide I was going to say, okay, thank you. There's not much to say. I thought, well, there's a lot of us.
Well, can
So
I plug my screen in?
yeah, take over.
Let's switch the source.
Thanks.
Okay.
So, yeah, my LAN is pretty new. Since I moved countries and then I moved cities, started a new job, basically started rebuilding my whole environment a couple of years ago. I started out with basically just a desktop PC, a laptop, a network connected printer, and an old NAS network attached storage box that I just used for doing image backups to off my systems. And that one, I started noticing, especially when I was working on my desktop, I'd need files that were on my laptop. When I'm working on my laptop, I'd need files that were on my desktop. When I'm on my desktop and booted into OS2, I'd find I wanted files that were on my Windows partition, and vice versa. And so I started thinking, you know what? Maybe I should just get a NAS to store all of my personal data files on instead of keeping them on, picking a computer to keep all my hard personal files on. So I decided to pick up another NAS. And this one, it's a Synology. They're pretty big name in consumer NASs. Synology Disk Station, and they're really nice actually. They have their own kind of custom operating system, which I think is based on Linux. But it runs in a web browser. You open a web browser, point it to the thing, and you've got like a kind of desktop with icons and toolbars and so on. And it actually works under OS2 Firefox. So I was impressed by that.
Yeah, I have one of those. They're fantastic actually.
They are, and
you can install all kinds of applications.
Yeah, exactly. So this is kind of my point here. So it started out as just a place for me to store my personal files. So it runs a variety of Samba. So I created a bunch of shares. I created, for example, a directory for my photos and videos. Created a directory for all my OS2 software and stuff, and a bunch of stuff like that. So I can just share those off any of my systems. Windows is actually a little worse at it than OS2 is. OS2, I just use the ArcaMapper client, the new one that's coming up in ArcOS 5.1. Anybody is looking forward to that. But Windows, it's a little annoying because Windows, I have to see several of these shares have different user credentials that they require. Because, you know, if I have a guest over, I want them to be able to access maybe my video share so they can get onto it from their phone or something and watch some videos that I might have. But I don't want them to have access to my financial documents. But so in ArcaMapper, I can just log on with multiple users and use different users to attach different shares. In Windows, for some reason, it won't let you log on multiple times to the same server or IP address with more than one ID. There's a cheat. You can do it if you connect to the first one using the host name and the second one using the IP address, because it's too dumb to realize that they're the same. But anyway, that's a bit of a digression. I've learned how to deal with that.
Set up DNS aliases.
Yeah, maybe. I mostly just live with it, honestly. So it started out as this, and then I was exploring the Synology, like DSM is the name of the operating system that it runs. I'm just noticing how much stuff you can do with it, because you can install not only Synology apps, you can install third-party apps. There's this whole thriving ecosystem of third-party Synology apps. So I started playing with running backups to it.
Yeah.
So my Zyxel NAS, which is the one I used to be using, is getting really old, and they don't provide firmware updates for it anymore. It only supports SMB1, nothing newer. So I'm sort of looking at moving off that one for backups. There's a media server as well.
What is the backup server? Is that an rsync daemon or?
For my OS2 systems, I was running this is what I was doing with it. I was running just a cron job that would do a differential zip
Oh,
on
okay.
all of my OS2 drives and just zip them onto the LAN drive. For some reason, that doesn't work with the disk station, and I think it's something to do with the newer version of Samba. Zip just hangs after a while. I've talked to Paul Smedley about it, but I haven't had a chance to follow up with him really in detail yet. But rsync also hangs after a while on that.
Oh, if you rsync as a mounted drive, but it's
Yes.
not an rsync daemon.
No.
Yeah.
No, it's just a Samba share.
Yeah.
But so I'm using a somewhat different backup methodology now, or I'm trying to shift to one. So I'll get to that in a minute. Then there's the media server. It uses what is it, UPnP or XDCM? I don't know, some bunch of acronyms. That anyway, your smart TV or your Roku or whatever can just access your NAS. You can play video files right off it onto my 60-inch TV, which is nice. And then I discovered that, well, what am I going to do with all my programming files, my source code? Because I really like having GitHub for my open source software. It's, as you were saying, like it's out there. It's not just out there, but it's a secure backup, well, a reliable backup. You've got the version history and everything. But you know, there's programs that I work on which aren't open source, which can't be open sourced, which aren't ready to be open sourced. Turns out you can install a Git server on the DSM. So I'm actually using the Synology NAS as a Git server for all my private software. So
Question, does this Synology have 2 hard drives in it?
this particular one, it's the DiskStation 218 Play, so it has 2, I think, 6 terabyte hard drives set up as RAID 1.
Yeah.
Mine has 4. It's a small little guy, and it's like it must be a 418.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
you
it's
can
about
get,
this big, and it has 4. I think they're 1 terabyte drives, but it does RAID 0. It's the best RAID,
RAID 1.
where
I
it
think.
reproduces.
RAID 1 is the one that mirrors the 2 drives across each other.
RAID 0 is not the best. If one
Okay,
is
then
not-
it's
if-
RAID 1 then.
Yeah, because if one drive dies, you've still got your stuff.
Exactly, that's right.
Yeah, and then you can.
By the way, I had it fail once, the actual motherboard of Synology, so I called them up and they said, well, we can't help you. They wouldn't help. They said, but you can buy a new one. So I bought a new one, and I took the drives out and plugged them in, and it came right back up and worked.
Yeah.
That was good.
Yeah. So RAID is very nice, but you know, RAID isn't a substitute for backing up properly. There's a service called iDrive. It's not to be confused with the Apple whatever it is. It's an independent service where they offer you just cloud storage. You can do whatever you like with it for a fairly cheap fee, monthly fee. I think I have like 1 terabyte or something space, which is enough to back up most of my stuff. It's all encrypted. You can choose to have them manage the encryption, in which case, yeah, they would have access to it, but they can also recover it if you ever lose your key. But you can also do what I do, which is user-managed encryption. So I choose the encryption key. All the encryption is done locally, so nobody on their side can ever decrypt it. So if you're paranoid, that's an option. So so I have the iDrive client installed on the NAS. There's a DSM version. So I just back up all the files off that onto my iDrive account. Like I think I run it 3 times a week because I don't write to it like multiple times a day really. So that's a little peace of mind. I also have, by the way, iDrive installed on my Windows desktop. And it writes directly to the iDrive account as well.
Does it back up like the Git server also for you?
It backs up any directory that I want on
Okay.
the hard drives.
And what's the cost of that?
I don't recall off the top of my head, but it's not very expensive. So yeah, I've got the Git server. Next thing, you can format partitions. Well, not partitions. Sorry, you can share out partitions using the VMFS file system, which VMware uses. So you can, if you have VMware ESXi, you can use it as a file store for your VMs. And I'll get to ESXi in a little. Then I also noticed you can set up an IMAP server. So what I decided I'd do, I haven't actually got around to doing this yet, but I have an IMAP server on my own personal domain where I keep my domain hosting account provides me with a Linux shell account where I've set up an IMAP server. So I keep all my personal mail on that, but my plan is, so that that one doesn't get overloaded, I'm going to set up the IMAP server on my disk station to copy all mail that's like more than a year old off my sort of publicly accessible, internet accessible IMAP mail server onto this, so that I have a separate IMAP mail server for all of my mail archives. So I haven't quite got around to getting that one set up yet, but that's pretty near the top of my to-do list. Another thing that you can do is use it as a quote cloud server. So you can just use it as if you can use it as internet accessible storage. It even has, I believe, apps that are kind of similar to Google Office that you can run on it. So if you have internet access to your DSM, and I'll discuss that in a moment, you can use it as almost a kind of Dropbox, except it's private and it's for you. And finally, this is the fun one, it has an OpenVPN server. So I can actually set up OpenVPN, and if I know my public IP address, I can open the port in my firewall, and then I can access my LAN through the VPN server on the NAS from anywhere on the internet. So I can access all my personal files, and I can also just use it as a VPN if I want a public Wi-Fi network somewhere, and I don't trust it. I can just VPN into my home NAS, and I'm using my home internet connection over the encrypted VPN. So
You would only expose the VPN to the outside world.
yeah.
Yeah. Just
So-
as a general security thing, don't start opening services with a port forward to the route. I know too many people find that convenient that say, oh, I'll put the remote desktop port on the window.
No, I just opened the VPN port.
No, I'm just
And
saying
then
it.
once I'm on the VPN, I'm on the LAN. I can open up anything else because I will now have a local IP address for my LAN. Unfortunately, I can't demonstrate this to you because for some reason I can't seem to connect to it from here. So it's obviously not quite perfect yet, but it may have something to do with the Wi-Fi here or the fact that I've just been reconfiguring it.
What protocol does the VPN use? Is it IPsec or is it an SSL?
I believe it's SSL.
Did you try using the hotspot on your phone instead of the network in the hotel?
Well, this is my work phone, so I don't want to get an angry message from the IT department. Yeah. Hey, what are you doing? So yeah, the VPN, I normally would use it from my phone or from, if this is booted into Windows, from Windows. I don't believe the OS2 port of the OpenVPN client supports that protocol, unfortunately. Yeah. Anyway, just recap some of what I said. And then the other nifty device that I put on my LAN, I bought an Asus mini PC a couple years ago. This is like about that big. It's like the size of half a shoebox. So I installed VMware ESXi 7 on it. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with VMware ESXi. It's a virtual machine product, except you run the virtual machines on the centralized server and you access them from other computers remotely, basically.
Through a web browser, right?
Several ways, yeah. You can do it through a web browser. You can also do it through the VMware Workstation program if you have that installed. There's also the VMware Remote Console, which is a lightweight app that runs on Windows, Mac, and Linux that you can download and point it to it. So I've set up a number of VMs on this box. I set up a Kerberos domain controller so that I could do a bunch of testing when I was developing ArcaMapper. I set up another mail server on this one. This was before I discovered that I could set one up on the DSM. So I was actually using the mail server on this one to test IMAP client development. When I've been trying to play with putting IMAP in PM mail, and I've been kind of using this as a local IMAP server to test with. Internet servers, that's more of a theoretical one. I'm not running any at the moment. And I also have various test VMs, like ArcOS, a couple of them. If I just need an ArcOS system that to do dumb stuff with or play around with, or I want to be able to access one of my sort of customized ArcOS systems from on the road, and I don't have what I need on this. And again, any of those VMs that I connect to is a device on my local home LAN, so I can do anything on those VMs as if I was on my own LAN.
And does VMware support OS2 very well?
You can run it, yeah. It works okay. There's no like mouse pointer integration, but it works pretty well in my experience. VMware ESXi is free for personal use. It's a little hard to find the reference. Like when you download it, they'll tell you that you need to register after or pay for it after 60 days or something. That's not actually true. If you want to use it with a vSphere like cluster server, then you have to pay for it. But if all you're using is a single ESXi server, all you have to do is register an account. It's free, and you can keep using it whatever you like for non-commercial uses. And it's really nifty just being able to access any VM, set up new ones. I can spin up new ones on my NAS because of the VMFS file system. It's a lot of fun to play with.
It's also not that expensive. I think it was $250 or something to get a paid version of it.
Yeah, there's an entry-level version that's about that price, I think. Yeah. So how do I know my public IP address if I want to connect to my home LAN because it runs on DHCP? Well, it's where I have a VM on that VMware box which runs Linux, although this could just as easily be done under OS2. I just happen to use the Kerberos domain controller VM for this because it was handy. So every hour it runs a cron job and uses wget to query my public IP address as seen by my local LAN, which is running on that VM. That command basically just downloads a small ASCII string containing the public IP address. And then I have a file where I cache that in my var cache directory. I call it public IP. And then whenever I do this every hour, I compare against the cached IP address. And if it's different, then I replace the cached IP address with that one. And then I run the like send mail program to just send myself a mail to my own personal email address saying, hey, my IP address has changed, here it is.
You know, the most routers, at least the last couple ones I've had, support a function which will, every time your outside IP address changes, it'll update a DNS entry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think
Sorry,
you
I
have,
lost
most
track.
of those services I think you either have to pay for or at least create an account. I don't
Well,
really want to
I
bother
think I
with
used,
that.
I forget which one, there
Yeah.
was a couple
Yeah.
choices,
Yeah.
and the router actually knows about them.
Yeah, you can also, Synology also has a service where if you sign up for an online account with them, you can actually then connect through that Synology account to your Synology NAS through your, because it has a way of talking to the NAS through its own systems if you sign up for it. I haven't done that because I generally don't like signing up for accounts with other people if I don't have to, especially if it involves giving them personal information. So.
My ISP is much more enlightened. I've had the same IP address for the last 20 years.
Honestly, mine changes almost never. It
Yeah.
basically changes when I have a power outage and the router reboots. That's about it.
That's why I have battery backups on all my routers and switches and everything, so that usually doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Right.
So putting them all together, using my home IP address, I can connect to my home LAN from anywhere. In theory, it doesn't seem to be working this weekend, as I mentioned, but that might be because the email got lost in the spam filter or something, because my provider just changed me to Exchange without asking me, or Outlook 365. I can access my private LAN drives using KIFs, i.e. Samba, or whatever. Access any of my virtual machines using VMware. Once I get my email archive set up, I'll be able to access my archived email from anywhere. And if I set up any cloud apps like the Synology online Office Suite thing, I can do that too. So, yeah, like who needs Dropbox? Who needs OneDrive? You can do all this. Well, I mean, obviously they have their uses, but if you're going to run on the cloud, I like to think, why don't run on your own cloud instead of somebody else's?
How big of hard drives do you have in Synology?
I believe they're 6 terabyte. They might be 8. I don't recall.
And
I think
they're regular hard drives, they're not SSDs?
They're SSDs actually.
Oh, okay.
And they're rated together, so it's a total of 6 terabytes.
And most of them also have the option to have smart monitoring, that if the drive fails, that you can get an email that it says, hey, I'm going to burn up or replace me.
Yeah, I wondered, in a RAID, how do you know that a drive failed?
The smart statistics of the disk. Disks have a built-in monitoring system, and if certain statistics get at a certain threshold, most of these Synologies have got an option to send an email when a disk is about to blow up. Now, the only problem is that what happens usually is that when you install the disks both at the same time, that they usually begin to fall over. So if you get one email that one disk has fallen over, run for your life, because then you swap pretty quickly.
Generally, you get depending upon the unit, you'll get a red light on that, from the indicator for that particular disk.
I mean, I see that sitting there and I wonder, how do I know if one of those drives failed?
Yeah,
I
the
have no
light
idea.
turns red, and then you know it's failed out.
Oh,
Yeah.
speaking of the lights on the unit, this is a nice feature that I only recently discovered. It's set up in my home office, which doubles as my guest bedroom, and you can actually configure it so that it'll dim all the LEDs at a certain hour, or turn them off at a certain hour and turn them on again.
Oh, that's neat.
So yeah.
Does you're using a Samba client in the Samba server in the Synology?
Yes.
And did you have to manually enable extended attribute support?
I don't believe I'm using extended attributes for them. I don't generally see it as necessary. For
What's
most
the
of what I
file
use.
system in the Synology, ext4?
I believe that it's either ext4 or XFS. I think it's ext4. I believe they're enabled on the file system. I don't think I generally turn them on in Arcamacro when I'm doing a connection though.
Because if they're enabled in the file system, the Samba server also needs to be enabled to allow you to read and write them over Samba.
Right. Well,
And ext4 has extremely limited extended attribute
yes, like 4K, I think. Yeah.
versus XFS, which is that's the file system of choice for us. If you're doing anything like desktop, backing up your desktop to
Mm-hmm. I don't recall exactly how I would have it configured. I do remember thinking, okay, what would be best here, but whatever I have, I haven't really had to look at the configuration again because it's working for me. So.
And you have 3.5 inch or 2-inch drives?
I can't, honestly,
I guess if they're SSDs, they'd be small.
I can't remember if they're 2.5 inch or NVMe sticks.
No,
I
these
think they're 2.5.
Synologies have got in for 3.5-inch discs.
No, mine has 2 and
Yeah,
They
they're-
only have two.
it has 4 2.5-inch discs, but they're spinning discs now.
If you do, however, install a NAS in your system, be very vigilant that in the modem, that universal plug and play is switched off.
Oh, yeah.
Because that has been recently in Dutch consumer programs or general
Yeah.
practitioner's office. They've got a modem from the ISP. It has universal plug and play switched on. Then the router comes into the network and it sees the router with universal plug and play, goes, ooh, I'm gonna be friendly. And it opens up then a directory that is not password protected to the outside world. So they could go, for example, to a doctor's practice. They found on the public IP address that was a port 21 listening. But the problem was, they didn't know that because universal plug and play was switched on in the NAS and in the router, that the stupid port was open to the outside world. So always be a bit careful with that feature. The devices are very good and convenient, but
it supports both 2.5 inch and 3.5 inch.
Okay.
a bracket and
According to
problem.
this. It says compatible drive type 2.5 inch SATA HDD with optional 2.5 inch disc holder.
Okay.
Yeah.
And which type number is it from Synology?
This particular one, it's the 218 Play. It's kind of
218?
218 Play. There's a regular 218 as well. This one is, they're all pretty much the same on the DS series.
I have a 418 Slim, I think it's called.
Okay,
It's
yeah.
small, it's small.
Uh-huh. I think the Slim one may specifically only support 2.5 inch.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
right.
But yeah, 418. I've considered getting a 418 just so that I can expand the drive space if I want to. It's pretty similar. The Play thing, I think it basically. I'm honestly not even sure what the difference is. It's supposedly optimized a little more for multimedia, acting as a multimedia server, but I don't pay much attention to that. I do keep some videos on it, and my TV has, well, my Apple TV has VLC client on it, so I can point it to that.
And they
play
cost
stuff.
like 300 and some bucks, but they're definitely worth it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
All that functionality in that OS in there, it's
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And Synology's